Most of my videos are pretty heavily scripted, and I try to be careful to do some fairly professional production on them. This morning, I'm going to try something a little different. I'm going to speak about something that's raw for me. It's been happening over the past 24 hours, and it's had a significant impact. And I'm going to try this for the purpose of helping people understand some of the impact that the world has on neurodivergent people. As a neurodivergent person myself, and as a therapist who specializes in working primarily with neurodivergent people, I think it's important that folks understand the impact of some of the ways that we behave toward each other these days. So, yesterday, against my better judgment, I wrote a Facebook post, which I don't normally do. I don't use a lot of social media, especially I don't put anything personal on Facebook in particular, because it's really nobody's business what my life is like. And I don't really need or want attention from relative strangers. If I want to share something with people that I care about, I'll call them or I'll arrange a time to talk to them or I'll text them. I don't need to put it out on Facebook for the world to see. And also, as part of my ongoing journey of healing and as part of my professional journey, I am making an effort to be more authentic and vulnerable and speak about the issues that matter to me. Because I have a lifelong history, like most neurodivergent people, of being told in many ways, in thousands of instances, that I'm either too much or not enough in any given context. One of the diagnostic criteria of autism is having difficulty reading social cues and not really understanding fully the social context and norms of the situation, the environment that we're in. That is the nature of autism. And as someone who has lived with that and did live with it for most of my life without knowing that I was autistic, I had the experience countless times of being told that I should just be silent, basically, and developed a lot of strategies for trying to appear normal and fit in whatever environment I found myself. I'm privileged as an autistic person in being able to do that most of the time. Not everyone can. That's why I'm level 1 on the very inadequate scale that the professionals use, 1 through 3, of measuring the degree to which someone is affected by autism. Not everyone can mask. For someone who is relatively low support needs or high functioning, however you want to call it, these terms are problematic. I can, in most cases, mask my autism. You wouldn't really know that I was autistic unless you're pretty sensitive to it, or unless you're autistic yourself, because we do have something similar to gaydar. We can detect each other somehow. But in the process of that, I learned to silence my voice and show up in ways that are very different from my actual internal experience. And there's a lot of research that shows that masking for neurodivergent people is highly correlated with everything from depression, anxiety, substance use, suicidality, all kinds of things, burnout especially. Masking comes at a very high cost. It's emotionally taxing. It is hard on the nervous system. And we wind up spending so much time behind these various masks that underneath we have no idea who we truly are. And we have trouble advocating for our actual lived experience, in part because the reaction from the world around us is often extremely negative when we show up in ways that are actually true to ourselves. I'm trying, in my effort to correct this and deal with my own constant borderline burnout and struggles with depression, anxiety, all the rest, to show up more authentically and to use my voice. Finally, after 58 years of largely being silent and having periods of advocacy and involvement in the world around me that in some ways were very positive, in other ways were extremely costly for me, I'm now trying to speak out more. And I feel a responsibility as a neurodivergent therapist working with neurodivergent people to be an advocate for people who cannot advocate for themselves very easily or very well. I don't know what kind of platform I have, but I'm trying to build one. And I'm trying to use my voice and share what I'm learning and what I see. It's my own perspective. It's not some kind of universal truth. But I think we do need to speak out, and we need to share our voices with the world because we matter. We're human. And every human deserves to use their voice. Yesterday, I sat down and I wrote a post for Facebook primarily. I don't know whether I'll share it on other platforms about what I'm seeing as a therapist working in my community, working with neurodivergent people, about the effects that the Republicans' big, beautiful bill from last fall is having through its Medicaid cuts, $1 trillion over 10 years, on our local hospital system, which is already, after just a few months, having dramatic impacts because, like most rural hospitals, they're highly reliant on Medicaid for the funding for their population and the care they provide. They're having to lay off more than 300 people and are facing a $50 million budget deficit, which is a lot of money for a small rural hospital system, as well as on my own client population and on my own life, because as another part of that big, beautiful bill, the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act coverage were eliminated for people like me who are not poor enough to qualify for Medicaid, but make too much money to qualify for other benefits and have a hard time paying the premiums that are being charged for getting health care these days. My insurance premium is about a third of my income now. It's almost as much as my mortgage. And I'm having to face the possibility of just dropping health insurance for myself and my wife. And we're in our late 50s and have health issues, so that's risky. So I wrote a post sharing my experience of what's happening, just to be a voice for this community and give a little more lived reality into the public dialogue about these highly controversial issues, so that people can see what it looks like on the ground. As background, I'm not just a therapist. I also, at one point in my career back in the late 90s, was a core member of the healthcare and insurance team of one of the premier management consulting firms in the world, Booz Allen and Hamilton, and I contributed to their white paper on healthcare reform in the late 1990s. I also was married to a doctor in our community for 14 years. I was on the board of one of the local community mental health agencies that serves children. And I've worked in many capacities in the healthcare field in this community. And I work with 50 clients at a time all across Oregon. So I'm well positioned to speak about the effects of this change in our approach to healthcare funding on my local community and the people I serve. One of the responses I got, though, was from an acquaintance, someone I met in Costa Rica years ago at a healing retreat, who responded with a combination of right-wing talking points and assertions and personal attacks, calling me mentally unstable for posting such a rant, as he called it. I read through my post. I believe it was actually fairly balanced and informed and carefully written. It was not a rant, but he went on with this trolling response, is what I would call it, not just on my public Facebook page in front of anyone who chose to read it, but then in private messages after I told him to stop, and continued, despite my reasoned responses, asking him to engage in polite conversation and respectful dialogue. He's welcome to disagree with me, but personal attacks are not okay. And he just continued and escalated in personal attacks until I finally had to block him, which I don't like to do in general. I value connection, I value dialogue, I value reasoned intellectual debate, even with people I disagree with deeply. I'm a therapist. I deal with people from all beliefs, all different backgrounds, every possible identity you can name. I work with them. But as someone who has a significant history of trauma, in part from bullying and toxic invalidation all my life, and as someone who has been forced to mask by being given this message that I should not speak, and my perspective is somehow wrong, I simply can't afford to expose myself to that anymore. And it's against my values to just bash someone on a personal level who disagrees with my perspective. Now, so I blocked him. I don't like doing that, but that was the net result. Today, 24 hours later, I'm having predictable voices going through my head. One says it was stupid to post my perspective in the first place. Facebook is a flawed platform. There's a lot of trolling, all the usual things. And that it was predictable that someone would just bash me from a different point of view. And my nervous system is really dysregulated today because I do have actual trauma from being bullied in the past. So I shouldn't expose myself to that anymore. I'm debating getting off Facebook entirely, just engaging in other forms of dialogue that are more substantive with people I choose, or just turning off the comment function, and just not sharing what I see and what I think and what I feel to protect myself. But I also feel a responsibility to share my perspective because it is valid, number one. It's only mine. I don't care if anyone changes their mind based on what I say, but I think it's important for people to hear different voices. And as someone who is neurodivergent and represents and works with a neurodivergent community of people, actual human beings that I see every week, 50 unique people at any given time, 30 conversations typically in an average week, with people from all walks of life who are almost all neurodivergent, and many have a history of trauma and are experiencing a world that is extremely painful. And the nature of the world as it is and their interactions with it is a big part of the problem that we're trying to work with. I feel it's important to share some of what that feels like to people who are not among the 3%, 5% who are neurodivergent and don't fully understand what that experience is like. We're in a time in the United States and other countries around the world that I guess I could sum up by just saying, fuck your feelings. The era of the snowflake. And that is brutal on people who actually are sensitive and can't tune down their sensitivity very well, whose only option is to hide and try their best to become invisible because the world as it is today is brutal on everyone. I'm not saying it's just for neurodivergent people, but on many communities, people of color, people whose gender identity doesn't fit the binary norms that our society says are standard, people whose sexuality doesn't conform with what we think is normal, people who are from other countries, all kinds of different intersectional identities are being brutalized by the society that we live in today. And it needs to stop. It's creating a huge amount of trauma and will make the world far worse for those who come. So I'm doing my small part as best I can to speak about that. And it's coming at enormous cost for my nervous system and my ability to function. Today, after that encounter with just one person, it wasn't like I got massive trolling. It was abuse. I'm struggling to function. And I've got 8 clients that I need to see today who need my support. So please, when you interact with others in whatever format, online, in person, I don't care, do your best to respond from a standpoint of curiosity, even if they strongly disagree. Neurodivergent people are not all angels. I'm under no illusion that we are easy to deal with, and our opinions are often challenging for the people around us to listen to in both the form that they come and the way that we express them. I'm not under any illusions about how hard it is to listen with curiosity sometimes. But just be kind. For God's sake, just be kind. As my grandmother would say, if you can't say something nice, say nothing at all. So I'm going to go in a minute and start my first session. And I appreciate you listening to my perspective. And I hope that this will do some small part to shift things in a more positive direction somehow. Thank you for paying attention.